It's time. It's time for a new section, and this section is called Fragments and Bottom Navigation Bar. Many apps on your mobile phones, whether Android or iPhone, which have a tab at the bottom of the screen, a bottom bar with different options, different screens you can go to, and those screens that you switch between using that bottom bar, they exist on Android in what's called a fragment. So this is an absolutely crucial skill for you as an Android developer in being able to build app layouts which are really easy to navigate for your users, as well as developing your understanding of fragments in general. We do use them for our apps with a bottom navigation bar, but they have many other uses as well, as you'll find out throughout this course. So the primary objectives for this section, by the end of the section, you're going to be able to understand how fragments work, how they are similar but not the same to activities, how they can live within an activity and be, as the name suggests, a small portion, a small fragment of the screen. Okay? And also by the end of the section, you're going to be able to create an app with a bottom navigation bar, and you're going to be able to navigate between fragments, between screens, using that bottom navigation. So I've always enjoyed cycling, and also in 2020, I really found myself getting into quite a fair bit of running. I happened to find myself with a bit of free time in 2020, as many of us may have done. So this is a useful app for me. I do have some fitness and health apps where I do log my runs and my bike rides. However, the place where I can see my personal bests, my personal records, isn't always that easy to find, and I don't think it's very well designed. So this app actually benefits me in my personal life. This is for me where I can store all of my personal bests or personal records. So as you can see in the app, we have a bottom navigation bar for running and cycling, so you can switch between the two section, the fragment as it is, as you'll soon see, which has a nice picture for running, a nice picture for cycling, and then it has each record that I'm interested in. So for the running, it's the best times, the personal bests. So 5k, 10k, what's my lowest time? And for the cycling, it's different things I'm interested in. There aren't really any set distances for sort of biking that I do. So it's my kind of other personal records, longest ride, biggest amount of hill climbing in one go, or what's my best average speed for a certain ride. As we go through this section, you'll be able to tweak this and add any records that may be important to you, or indeed any different sports that might be important to you. The concept is the same. So the Record Keeper app. As usual for all of our sections, we'll cover some core programming concepts. Not as many in this section, although one of them, the first one, interfaces, can seem a very complex and intimidating concept. Actually, interfaces themselves are very simple, but the way they're used and the reasons why they're used, that's a bit more subtle, that's a bit more nuanced, and at times complicated. So I'll be making sure to really make the concept of interfaces clear to you, why you would use them, examples of how you've already been using them, and also give you tips on when you might want to make an interface yourself to solve a certain programming problem. So we'll do a deep dive into interfaces and how they're used. And then the second concept is much more simple, the when statement in Kotlin, or in Java they would be called a switch statement, and how they can be used as an improvement to lots and lots of if, else if statements. Okay? As well as our primary objectives and those programming concepts, some secondary objectives. The first one, the activity lifecycle. We'll be able to cover this in one or two tutorials, so it's not a whole section, it's not a whole primary objective. However, it's a very important thing to understand. The fact that when you have an activity on the screen, the process of it being created, recreated, paused, destroyed, what happens when the phone rotates, there's actually quite a lot of things happening under the hood with an activity. You would have already seen some of this without even realizing it in our onCreate method. So when the activity is created by the Android system, okay, so you've already seen one of the lifecycle functions, the lifecycle methods onCreate. So we'll be doing a deep dive into all of the lifecycle methods, what happens when an activity is created, and what happens when it is paused, recreated, or finished. And also we'll see how that's relevant to our app, especially with our bottom bar and our use of fragments. We can see how the activity lifecycle fits in and why it's important. Also, as an extra bonus, we'll look at option menus and menu resource files. So for option menus, think of the things like the three dots in the top right of the app you might have seen, the three-dot menu, and you can tap this and you get some more options for things to do. So that's an option menu, and we'll also see how this then relates to our menu resource files, how we define a menu. And we'll also be using these same menu resource files to help make our bottom navigation. That will also depend on a menu resource file, okay? And this section will continue to develop Android widgets, Android views that we can use in our layout files. So first of all, of course, the bottom navigation view, as it's called in Android, or you can call it the bottom bar or bottom navigation bar. But the widget is called a bottom navigation view, as you can see there, and we use that to switch between fragments. And finally, we're going to understand how the constraint layout works. That default layout that we've seen many times right from the first section. We're going to learn how it works, how, while slightly more complicated, it's very powerful. A view group, a container to pin or constrain edges of views to other views. You can think of it a bit like a supercharged relative layout, but much more powerful and much more flexible for building professional modern layouts. So, let's get to it. Before we dive into making our new project for this section, I just want to show you what selecting the bottom navigation app template does in the project setup wizard. If you remember back to the very start of this course when we first looked at the project setup wizard, I did mention that at some point in the course we would explore one or two of the templates to see what Android Studio gives us when we select them. So just for an exploration, we're going to go ahead now and select the bottom navigation template, see what things we get. We're not actually going to use this for making our project for the section. We'll be doing it all manually, doing everything from scratch, as it's the best way to learn what's going on. Not only that, but there's one or two things in the template which are done slightly differently, aren't necessarily the best way to do things or the most appropriate way to do it for this particular project. But what we will do is we'll have a look at this, see the main components, see the main pieces, get a feel for the sort of things we're going to be exploring and learning about in this section. Okay? You don't have to make this project with me now, you can just watch the video and see what I'm showing you, but if you want your own reference copy of the bottom navigation template, then feel free to go ahead and create this project with me. So I'm at the Welcome to Android Studio dialog, I'm going to select Create New Project, and by default it selects Empty Activity, but this time we're going to find in the list Bottom Navigation Activity, which for me is next to Empty Activity. So select this, and then click Next. Now for the application name, I'm just going to name this something descriptive to remind me it's the bottom navigation template that we're just exploring, so I'll simply call it Bottom Navigation Template App. I'll leave the package name as a default and the save location is fine. Leave the language as Kotlin, of course, and for the minimum SDK, at least API 21, at least Android 5.0. If you have a recent version of Android Studio and yours is even higher than this, that's fine. But if it's lower, make sure from now on it's always at least API 21. Okay, and then click Finish. Okay, and mine's now finished loading. So depending on what version of Android Studio you have have a different file or a different view to me here. But I've got activity_main and some mobile_navigation file that we're not interested in for this tutorial. So I'm going to close down mobile navigation. I'm going to leave activity_main. And you can see mine's in design view, so if yours is in code, then make sure it's either in split or design view. So I'll leave mine as design view, and we can see a bottom navigation bar, this bottom navigation view down here. So straight away in this template, we have a layout with a bottom navigation bar that we can start to customize and make our own. If I just go to the split view, if I bring the project pane across a little bit, you can see we have the constraint layout that we've seen a few times before, and we are finally going to learn how to use this in this section. And then we have a bottom navigation view, and it's this bottom navigation view, if I click on it, you can see that it corresponds to the bottom navigation bar that you see there, the way that the users will switch between the different screens or the different fragments. You can also see we have this fragment element that we don't need to worry about too much. We'll be doing it out a slightly different way to this, but you can see our first little sneak peek at the concept of fragments. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the project pane now on the left and change the Android view to project as normal. I'm going to press the target button to quickly expand the folders to where activity_main is. And you can see alongside activity_main, this layout, we have 3 more layouts: fragment home, fragment dashboard, fragment notifications, which corresponds to the 3 things that you can see in our bottom navigation bar, our bottom navigation view there. I'm not going to bother opening these files for now because at the moment they're pretty blank, there's not much in them. But what I will do is I will open some of the programming code. So if you can open the Java folder and then navigate to where the main activity is, you can see there. So we have the main activity, so let's go ahead and open this. And as you can see there in our code, we have our bottom navigation view. And then we have some stuff which is going to differ from what we do in this section. We have these things relating to nav controller, setup nav controller. So everything from line 18 down. This is a slightly new way of configuring bottom navigation bars and fragments, this concept of the navigation controller. We're not going to worry about this nav controller mechanism in this section. What this does is it does a lot of the wiring up, a lot of the connecting of the bottom bar and the fragments and the switching between the mechanism. It does a lot of that under the hood. Now, from a convenience point of view, this can be really good, really desirable. From a learning point of view, it's actually no good because we never actually learn how fragments work, how fragments are switched, and how you can tie it into a bottom navigation bar or something else, okay? Also, while at first it can seem convenient to have these controllers that take care of it all for us, it's not always appropriate to use this new nav controller system. Sometimes when you get more complicated projects, it can actually cause more problems than it solves. For example, in the company which I work for, with our very popular app, we don't use the nav controller, but we do have a bottom navigation view, okay? We do it all manually. It gives us more control. It makes it clearer for us to see what's going on. So I just wanted to show you in this template, if you start to use this yourself, which is absolutely fine, you may need to do some research on this nav controller system. A lot of it's taken care of for you in this template, but actually you don't have to use it. And you're going to see yourself in this tutorial as we start to learn about bottom navigation view and about fragments and about switching fragments, and we know how to switch between them as the user changes the bottom navigation option, okay? We're going to learn it's not too difficult, and actually understanding how that works is more important than using this nav controller, okay? So you can ignore all of this, but there's one thing that the template does that I really, really like. If you look over on the project pane, we have main activity, and then we have a folder called UI, standing for user interface. And when we open this user interface, you can see 3 more folders, or 3 more packages, as they're known in Java or Kotlin world, one for each of the destinations, home, dashboard, and notifications. And inside there, you have the 3 fragments, as well as a view model that we don't worry about in this section. So if I go ahead now and open up our home fragment, you can see a class which looks slightly like an activity. We have an onCreate view method rather than an onCreate method, okay? And then we have some code we don't understand. We have some stuff relating to a view model that we won't be using in this section. We won't be needing this. But in the template, this is all taken care of for us, and we can start customizing the fragment layout that you see here, fragment home. We can start customizing this just like a normal layout. And then we can start doing things in the code to change some of those views, like setting the text on the text view, okay? So the last thing we can do in this quick overview, this quick exploration of the bottom navigation template, is run the app. We can see what it looks like and what the basic template gives us. So let's go ahead and do this. Okay, and you can see on my emulator we have home, dashboard, and notifications on the bottom bar. And when I click between them, you can see this is the home fragment, this is dashboard fragment, this is notifications fragment. So you can see those are swapping and switching between. Okay, so we get a basic template when we select that from the project wizard. And feel free to explore this yourself and try and make a project yourself using this. We, however, are going to build our bottom navigation app completely from scratch to learn how all these things work under the hood. If I go back to Android Studio, the key things we have our activity, we have our different fragments, you can see notifications, home, dashboard, and then in the activity layout, activity_main, we have a bottom navigation view, and we have somewhere or something with which to swap out our fragments. So those are the key things to take away from this. Let's now go ahead and make a brand new blank project for our record keeper app and build this whole thing out from scratch. I've closed down the bottom navigation template app, so I'm back at the Welcome to Android Studio dialog. So now let's create the project that we're going to be working on for the rest of this section. So let's click Create New Project, and this time leave it on empty activity. We want to do everything ourselves from scratch here, and click Next. So this now is going to be the application name, the thing that goes in the manifest at the top of our toolbar, everything ourselves from scratch here, and click Next. So this now is going to be the application name, the thing that goes in the manifest at the top of our toolbar. So I'm going to call my scratch and be working on for the rest of this section. So let's click Create New Project, and this time leave it on empty activity. We want to do everything ourselves from scratch here, and click Next. So this now is going to be the application name, the thing that goes in the manifest at the top of our toolbar. So I'm going to call mine simply Record Keeper. Feel free to change the name if you want. I'm going to change the package name off of com.example. Seems to have reverted back to that recently when I updated, so I'll do com.mydomain, simply because one day I might decide to publish this. I probably won't publish this app. You're free to publish it yourself if you want to, as long as if you make lots of money off it, you give me some share of the royalties. No, I'm just joking. So com.vinnorman.recordkeeper, you call yours what you want, and then save location is fine, Kotlin and API 21. So that looks fine to me. We can click Finish. Okay, and we're into our new blank project. As you can see, a lot less boilerplate code generated for us, but that's just the way we want it. I'm going to move the project pane over, change it to the project view, and put my onCreate method in a bit of space. Good. So the first place to look in our empty project will be inside the activity main layout. And if I switch this from design mode to split view, okay, we can see just a simple constraint layout and our text view in the middle. So we can go ahead and remove the text view. So we will be doing an overview over how fragments work and how they relate to an activity. But in simple terms, as a quick introduction, the main activity, this main activity class at the top, this screen, this will be like the parent screen that holds everything. It will have our toolbar, it will have our bottom navigation bar so the user can switch between screens or switch between fragments as it is. And there'll be some kind of container where we swap out the fragments, okay? So this will be the container, the parent for the whole app. So on this screen, we're going to need simply the bottom navigation bar at the bottom here, and then a container to change out the fragments. And rather than using linear layout or relative layout again, this time we're going to finally learn how to use constraint layout. And as the next thing that we need to do is add the bottom navigation view to this layout and put it at the bottom, we're going to need to know how to use constraint layout now. So with text view deleted, leave this constraint layout element here with the opening and closing tag, and let's dive in right now into learning how this constraint layout works. I'm going to split the three main things that we need to know when working with constraint layouts into separate tutorials. So in the project pane, I've made a new layout file called constraint_layout_1. We'll do the three tutorials in three different files. So if you can go ahead and do the same, get this constraint layout 1 layout file so we can have a play around and learn about how constraint layout works. And once you've made that file, by default it should put the constraint layout as the root element. If for any reason it doesn't, it does a linear layout or something else, then you can go ahead and type constraint layout autocomplete and just completing the layout height, match parent, and of course layout width, match parent, and do a normal opening and closing tag. Okay? And then with a quick auto format to tag that up, we should have an empty constraint layout ready to start working with. So in this first tutorial, we're going to focus on the core concept of constraints, what they are and how you can work with them. So a constraint layout is a view group. It's a container, just like our linear layout or our relative layout. If we think back to linear layouts, well, the way that container works is the views are stacked one on top of each other for a vertical layout, or side by side by side for a horizontal orientation. So that's our linear layout. Then we have the relative layout where we could put views relating to each other. We could say this view should be after this view, before this view, layout below that view, or aligned to the parent top, aligned to the parent bottom. Okay, so with the relative layout, we had a little bit more control putting views in relation to each other. Well, a constraint layout takes things even further. You can think of the word constraint like the word pin. When we constrain a view, we pin it to something else. So we can pin a view to another view, or we can pin a view to the parent. But with constraint layout, we can pin every side, every edge of that view. The top, bottom, the left side, the right side. We can pin any edge to any other edge. Okay? So in this first tutorial, learning how to use constraint layout, we will do exactly this. We'll put some views on the page, and we'll see how we can pin the edges to other things to be able to put views pretty much anywhere we want. So in the middle of the page, go ahead and place a regular button, capital B. We'll just use a normal button, not a material button. We'll do wrap content and wrap content for it, and just do some dummy text. So we'll call this test button 1, and then a self-closing tag. So straight away, this returns us an error on the word button, saying that this view is not constrained. So we haven't told this view where it's supposed to sit. We haven't constrained or pinned any of its edges to anything else. So by default, it will place it at 0, 0, which is basically the very far top left corner. But this is not ideal. You don't want to be doing this. So we need to pin this both vertically and horizontally. So the first thing we'll do, using constraints, using this idea of pinning edges to other edges, we'll try and move this button from the top left to the bottom right. So the way we could do that, if we just look at the design preview, if we could pin the bottom of the button to the bottom of the parent, to the bottom of the container, the constraint layout, that should move it to the bottom. So let's do exactly this now. Somewhere inside the button, we want to add a constraint to constrain the bottom of the button to the bottom of the parent, the bottom of the constraint layout. And the way we do this is with attributes that are called layout_constraint, all lowercase. And if we scroll up and down, we can see end to the end of, right to the right of, bottom to the bottom of, top to the top of. We can constrain any edge of this view to any edge of any other view, which is incredibly powerful. So if we add layout constraint bottom to the bottom of, and we say the parent, the container, then you can see the button jumps to the bottom. We've pinned the bottom edge to the bottom of the parent. Right, we can do right to the right of the parent. And just like that, we've constrained, we've pinned the button to the bottom right corner. There's actually another way to do right and left. This means if we change to a phone which language is a right to left side of the screen, and we can check this in our design preview. You see where it says default, ENUS, the default language, we can select preview right to left. And you can see with this selected, end to the end of, moves to the other side. If I left it as right to the right of, it would still stay at the right no matter what the language. So generally speaking, it's better to use start and end than left and right. I rarely, if ever, use left and right. I always use start and end. So end to the end of, that will respect the language that the user's phone is set to. If I remove the right to left preview, it's back to the right hand side. So that is constraining the edge of a view to its parent. As a little test now, see if you can constrain another view to the bottom left of the screen. Pause the video, give it a go yourself. So the way we do this is button. I'll do wrap content. I'll do text, test button 2, self-closing tag. I'll do bottom to the bottom of again, parent, and it jumps down. We could just leave it like that, but we have got an error saying we've not constrained it horizontally, so I'm also going to add start to the start of parent, and then the error goes away. If you did left to the left of, that's also okay, but better is to do start to the start of. So the first thing we can do is we can constrain our views to the parent, any edge of our view to any edge of the parent. But the real power of constraint layout lies in constraining views to other views. If I give my two buttons an ID, so ID button _1 and ID button _2, I'll do a quick auto format just to tag that up. So as well as constraining or pinning edges to the parent, we can also constrain edges to the edges of other views. So I now want to put a button that's still on the far right side or the far end, but I want it to be directly above test button 1. So the way I would do this, wrap content, text, test button 3. I would still add my end to the end of constraint, parent. But this time, I want to constrain the bottom of test button 3, so the bottom of this button, to the top edge of test button 1. So I would do layout constraint bottom to the top of. Now, by the way, when you're doing autocomplete, you don't have to keep typing layout_constraint every time. I just type the directions that I want. So with a lowercase b, BOTT, and then TO for 2, and then TOP, bottom to the top of. That's the way I quickly add my constraints. No need to keep typing layout constraint. So bottom to the top of, autocomplete, and I want the bottom edge of my button, button 3, to be constrained to button 1. And if you look on the screen, test 3 button is now directly above test button 1. I'm just going to very quickly add another button and place it in the top right of the screen. So I'll copy button 3. I'll change the text to test button 4. I'll delete the constraints and I'll just change it to top the top of parent and end to the end of parent. So I've placed that button in the top right of the screen. I'll give button 3 and button 4 IDs. So for your final challenge, to be able to constrain edges to other views, could you put test button 5 underneath test button 4, so the top edge is underneath the bottom of test button 4, but also to the left of button 4, or to the start of button 4 rather, so the right edge of test button 5. Finishes at the start of test button 4. Could you put a button exactly there where I've just shown you in that drawing? So pause the video, try and do this yourself. Okay, if you got stuck or you want the solution, so we make a new button, we'll say wrap content, we'll call this last one test button 5. So I want the top edge of this button to be under the bottom edge of button 4. So the top of this button to the bottom of button 4. And that will move it below button 4, but as you can see, horizontally it's still at the far left side of the screen. So I also want the end, or the right at the end of the preview, and that's constraints are to either the parent container, the view group constraint layout, or pinning them to other views.